Chuck Schumer and Pam Bondi appear together in the opening line like a match striking dry wood. The instant their names share the same sentence, the situation stops being routine politics and turns into something far more threatening for those who have spent years trying to keep certain truths hidden. That is exactly why what unfolded on the Senate floor immediately grabbed the attention of Washington and beyond. The tension was unmistakable. The stakes were clear. And the moment Schumer stood up to offer a single amendment, just one sentence with one clear instruction, it became obvious this was never about routine documents. It was about exposure. Schumer made it plain from the start. "Mr. President, this morning I introduced a very simple amendment," he said, explaining that it directly orders the Attorney General to release the Epstein Files. Nothing more. Nothing less. He emphasized that this amendment is identical to the one already moving through the House and the same measure actively supported by his colleague from Oregon. Schumer pointed out that Republicans could act immediately, even today, to take the next step toward releasing files they have publicly demanded for years. His message was blunt. If Republicans vote no, they are telling the American people they should not be allowed to see the Epstein Files. He then challenged them directly. After years of speeches demanding accountability, transparency, and justice for the victims of Epstein's crimes, why would they refuse now? Schumer reminded the chamber of Republicans' own words. He cited Senator Mitch McConnell, who once said the accusations against Epstein were horrendous and that it was good news they were being pursued. Schumer asked plainly what happened to that position. He referenced current Majority Leader John Thune, who said less than 2 months ago that everyone wants justice served with full disclosure and transparency. He also highlighted Senator Marsha Blackburn's statement that identifying everyone involved with Epstein is essential to dismantling a massive human trafficking and sex trafficking operation. Schumer didn't stop there. He quoted Senator Ron Johnson, who said the alleged victims deserve to know what happened and that the American people deserve the truth as well. Schumer made clear he agreed with every one of those statements. Then he delivered the core message. This is the moment of truth. Every senator now has a clear choice. They can vote to give transparency to the American people by releasing the Epstein Files, or they can vote to hide the very records they have claimed for years they wanted made public. Schumer ended with no ambiguity. If Republicans vote no, they are openly declaring that the American people should not see the Epstein Files. Schumer pressed the point again, speaking directly to his Republican colleagues and to every senator in the chamber. He made it unmistakably clear. A no vote means telling the American people they do not deserve to see the Epstein Files. There was no room for spin or interpretation. In his words, the public has a right to transparency, and that right has been denied for far too long. Americans, he said, are fed up with what he described as Donald Trump's nonstop pattern of lies and cover-ups surrounding the Epstein records. Schumer laid out the accusations one by one. He said Trump lied when he promised to release the Epstein Files. He said Trump lied when he claimed the FBI never informed him whether his name appeared in those records. He said Trump lied when he denied writing the explicit and disturbing letter to Epstein on his 50th birthday. And, Schumer added, Trump lied again just last week when he dismissed the entire issue as nothing more than a Democratic hoax. According to Schumer, this is not a hoax. It is real, and the American people want answers. They want the full truth, not deflection or denial. He argued that what the public is seeing instead is a constant stream of bold falsehoods, and what looks like a coordinated effort to hide damaging information. That has led Americans to ask a simple but powerful question. What is Donald Trump trying to conceal? Schumer said the Senate has the power to lift that curtain. By voting yes on his amendment, lawmakers could take a decisive step toward releasing the files and restoring public trust. Since Trump, in his view, cannot be trusted to tell the truth, Schumer insisted it now falls to the Senate to force the issue. Turning back to Republicans, Schumer delivered a blunt warning. As long as they continue voting no, he said, Americans will lose even more trust in government and in the senators blocking transparency. He then yielded the floor and noted the absence of a quorum, setting the procedural machinery in motion. But the message had already landed. He was demanding the release of the Epstein Files, the same records that powerful figures across politics, finance, and elite circles have long hoped would remain hidden. What had once been quiet resistance quickly turned into visible panic. Schumer made it clear this was not symbolic posturing or a distant promise. This was immediate. The Senate could act now. The vote could happen today. Republicans who had spent years loudly calling for transparency were suddenly backed into a corner. There were no more speeches to hide behind, no slogans to repeat, and no excuses left. The choice was simple and unavoidable: vote yes and release the files, or vote no and reveal themselves as the obstacle standing between the American people and the truth. Schumer walked through every statement, every interview, and every moral lecture Republicans had delivered over the years on this very issue. He reminded the chamber that Senator McConnell once called the accusations against Epstein horrendous and said they should be aggressively pursued. He pointed to Senator Thune, who only weeks earlier insisted that full disclosure and transparency were essential. He recalled Senator Blackburn's claim that the only way to dismantle massive trafficking networks was to expose everyone involved. And he cited Senator Johnson, who repeatedly said the public has a right to know what really happened. These were not Democratic talking points. They were Republicans' own words, their own quotes, their own public declarations. Schumer used those statements like receipts, laying them out one by one. This wasn't about scoring political points or launching personal attacks. It was a direct test of credibility and integrity. If those words meant anything, this was the moment to stand behind them. But beneath that surface exchange, a deeper tension was driving the entire confrontation. This was never just about speeches, headlines, or sound bites. It was about a truth that has been buried for years and no one in power has been willing to fully unlock. For decades, the Epstein case has existed in a fog of partial disclosures and endless speculation. The public has only been allowed to see fragments: a private island, a luxury jet, incomplete guest lists, trips that were never fully explained, a tight circle of wealthy and powerful individuals who always seemed to walk away untouched. The central question was never only what Epstein did. The real question has always been who helped him, who protected him, and who benefited from his silence. Those answers, Schumer implied, are inside the files. Flight logs, sealed testimony, visitor records, financial transactions, internal communications, messages involving people whose influence stretches far beyond party lines, even hints of who may have pressured investigators, who may have received favors, and who may have known far more than they ever admitted publicly. That is what is truly at stake. Not paperwork, power, the kind of power that can destroy careers, rewrite public narratives, and expose a political system that looked away. While everything was happening in plain sight, Schumer didn't spell this out directly, but the message was unmistakable. If the files are released, they will not damage just one party or one administration. The impact will reach people no one expects, including figures long treated as untouchable. That reality explains why Schumer turned his focus to Donald Trump, not with speculation or theatrics, but by highlighting Trump's own contradictions. Trump promised to release the files, then failed to do so. Trump claimed he didn't know whether his name appeared, despite being briefed by investigators. And Trump dismissed the entire scandal as a hoax, a familiar tactic he uses whenever an issue threatens him. The resurfacing of Trump's vulgar letter to Epstein on his 50th birthday, a letter Trump now claims never existed, became another clear example of how he has tried to rewrite the past. Schumer was not arguing that Trump is the only person with something to hide. His point was sharper than that. Trump, he argued, is the one openly trying to shut the entire conversation down. When someone dismisses a case involving years of documented exploitation and abuse as a hoax, the public is right to ask why. What is the motive? What is being protected? And who benefits from sealing this story away forever? For years, online discussions and investigative reporting have raised unsettling possibilities. Some suggest that high-profile individuals feared being exposed. Others believe certain institutions chose silence over scandal. There are long-standing claims that Epstein was not just a criminal acting alone, but a connector, someone whose access to powerful elites made him useful, protected, and insulated by layers of influence. Reports have also suggested that these networks did not simply vanish after Epstein's death. Instead, influence, favors, and secrets may still be quietly circulating, hidden behind non-disclosure agreements, redacted records, and political pressure. This is the system Schumer was pointing to, a system that survived Epstein himself. Epstein may be gone, but the people who enabled him, the people who looked the other way, the people who benefited from his connections, and the people who protected him are still alive, still influential, and still hoping the files never see the light of day. That is why the Senate vote carries far more weight than a routine procedural action. It is a test of whether Congress is willing to confront a culture that shielded predators while ignoring and silencing survivors. Schumer stressed that survivors are not just seeking closure. They are seeking validation, acknowledgement, and the truth they were denied for decades. While their experiences must always be treated with care and respect, one fact cannot be disputed. For years, survivors spoke up, and for years they were ignored. Not because there was no information, but because too many powerful people chose not to look. The Epstein Files could finally reveal whether institutions failed these victims and whether those failures were accidental, negligent, or intentional. There is a clear reason so many Americans are demanding transparency, and there is an equally clear reason so many powerful figures are pushing for limits, redactions, delays, or outright denial. Every decision to release information reveals something. Every refusal to act conceals something. And this is where the public comes in. Schumer was not speaking only to senators on the floor. He was speaking to viewers, voters, and anyone who has followed this case with frustration, suspicion, or anger. Because political systems rarely move on their own. Silence protects power. Public pressure is what forces the truth into the open. Schumer understands that this vote will ultimately be shaped by how loudly the public demands the truth. This is not a fight about left versus right or partisan point scoring. It is about whether the United States government is prepared to confront one of the darkest, most corrupt, and most disturbing systems ever linked to powerful American elites. At its core, the question is simple but uncomfortable. Is Congress willing to show the public everything? Without edits, without delays, and without hiding behind excuses? What Schumer is really doing is forcing a choice. Does the government stand for transparency or secrecy? Does it stand with survivors or continue the long tradition of silence? Does it stand with the public interest or protect private power structures that have operated behind closed doors for decades? These are the lines being drawn, and there is no neutral ground left to stand on. Just as important, this moment is not defined only by what senators decide inside the chamber. It is shaped by what ordinary people decide outside of it. Political pressure does not come from speeches alone. It comes from attention, persistence, public outrage, and an unwillingness to look away. When the public stops paying attention, those in power feel safe. When the public demands answers, institutions are forced to respond. This moment is a test. Not just for Republicans, not just for Democrats, not just for Donald Trump, and not just for the Senate. It is a test for the country as a whole. Are Americans willing to face uncomfortable truths, even if those truths point toward people they once trusted or admired? Are lawmakers willing to stand by their own words about accountability and transparency? And are institutions prepared to expose themselves by finally revealing how Epstein was protected for so long? Schumer's message is straightforward. This vote will reveal something crucial. Not necessarily what is inside the files, but who truly wants them released and who does not. That is why staying informed matters. That is why your voice matters. This story is not over. In fact, it is only beginning. The fallout could reshape how people understand political power, elite influence networks, and the long-buried secrets that have shaped American life more than most ever realized. If you want more clear, in-depth breakdowns like this, covering major political confrontations, hidden power struggles, and behind-the-scenes battles the public deserves to understand. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. This story is heating up fast, and you will want to be here when the next development drops.